We did complete lesson 6. I mean, we might not have done every single example on that note sheet, but if you want all the examples, they are posted in Schoology under the notes. But it was just features of graphs. So we're moving on beyond just like linear functions. Like obviously, you know, linear functions, some of those features are y-intercept, slope, basically a x-intercept. Sometimes you can use to graph your linear functions. But now we're seeing functions of all sorts of different shapes and situations. So still y-intercept is where it touches on the y-axis. X-intercept is where it touches on the x. Then now we have things like maximum and minimum, and then increasing, decreasing, all of that good stuff. We don't often spend time in here writing down vocabulary. I don't know about you, like there's different opinions about some teachers think that if you write down everything, you remember it better. Personally, not for me. Like in college, I would print out the professor's slideshows and take like additional notes that they didn't say. Like I wouldn't bother writing anything down. Plus, like in college, they say way too much stuff to write it all down, and they go so fast. So, like my opinion is, it's better to apply all this vocabulary rather than write down this big paragraph to know that a decreasing function is when it goes down from left to right. You know what I mean? If you ever wanted to make flashcards, these are in the notes. You just got to pull it up in Schoology and you could see those defined definitions. But yeah, lots of vocabulary today. One thing I do want to point out that maybe wasn't clear is that minimum and maximum is really just referring to the output. Like if we're talking about the situations from today, this would be my maximum height. Well, it's my maximum in general, but really we're just referring to the height. We're not referring to the maximum time, right? We're just talking about the y. So whenever it says to identify the maximum, don't tell me it as a coordinate, even though like it can be written as one. Tell me just the y of it. The maximum is 8. All right. My minimum is 10. All right. It's really just the y of whatever coordinate it's at. But that's really it. Now just apply that to your practice. Try to get 80% or higher. That look it is still available to do as extra credit if you wanted to get a better grade in math class specifically. But other than that, after you get 80% or higher, then you're welcome to use the time as you see. Questions? Okay, so number 1 on lesson 6, this graph represents Andre's distance from his bicycle as he walks in a park. Decide whether the following statements are true or false. So the graph has multiple horizontal intercepts. Horizontal intercept is another word for what? X-intercept actually, right? Because our horizontal axis, think of like the sun sets on the horizon, right? So like our horizontal axis is also known as our x-axis. So do we have more than one place where it touches on the x? So we have multiple horizontal intercepts. That is true. The horizontal intercept of the graph represents, or one of them, represents the time when Andre was with his bike. Let me reread what the situation was. The graph represents his distance from his bicycle as he walks in a park. So are at least one of the horizontal intercepts where he's with his bike? I would think that that's true. So that's why I have to go back and read. It's distance from his bicycle. So if the distance is 0, then she is with his bicycle. Right? And I would say that for sure. A minimum of the graph is 17.1. So first of all, when we say minimum, we're really just referring to the y, so I'm automatically kind of thinking false just because of that. But 17.1 is here. And I wouldn't necessarily say that's a minimum, that's just a dip. All right, our minimum is when we're at a distance of 0, that's the smallest y value we could have. So I'm gonna say no on that one. The graph has 2 maximums. So let's see. If they happen to be the same, then yes, there can be 2 maximums, but if they're different, then you would only pick the one that's highest. This one looks a little bit higher. Because right here, like this one punches the 8, this one's a little bit above the 8. I would say that is false. There is not 2 maximums. And about 21 seconds after he left his bike, he was the farthest away from it at about 8.3 feet. So after he left his bike, and that was its highest, about 8.3. That looks pretty good to me. All right, I definitely made sure the units were correct. So like 21 being the X, 8.3 being the Y, and that matches the T. Exactly. All right, so questions on this one. This question. Questions on other questions. Sorry, let me just questions more. All right. So here are the equations that define 3 functions. Notice they all have different names, f of x, g of x, and h of x. It says which function value is the largest for when the input is 100. I know the input is 100 because it's in the parentheses, placing the x. For which function is it the largest when the input's a negative 100? And which function is the largest for when the input is 1 out of 100? So there's lots of ways you could go about it. You could try graphing, but because one of the inputs is 1 out of 100, I'm gonna kind of lean away from graphing. I mean, it's not impossible to figure out which decimal that is, but still, I'm gonna lean away from graphing for this one. I will still use a calculator though, to help me with some of the math and the order of operation. Because we're having to plug in 3 different numbers into each equation. So that's a lot of math that you're having to do. So I would type in, like for f of x, I'm not going to necessarily use the function notation. I mean, I don't know if it would really do anything if I typed in 100. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave the left side of the equal sign off, but this is me plugging into function f because that was 4x minus 5. So since this 100 is replacing an x, anywhere I see an x, I'm going to put that. In a different cell, I'm going to put function g. And anytime you are plugging in, you should use parentheses. So like how function g was this, I'm still putting parentheses. You can double up on parentheses just so that I don't have to worry about it too much for comparing. And then for h of x, putting that one down here. And we're comparing all the outputs when the input's 100. So it says which function value is the largest? Which one would you guys say? F of x, g of x, or h of x? Good. And then now we're doing the same. And because I already typed it and I use parentheses, that should make it easy now when I change this a little bit and make it like negative 100. And now comparing these, which one is the largest?
If these were all balances in your bank account, which one would be the least worst, if that makes sense? The negative 30 is the highest. So that would be function H. All right. And then lastly, the 1 over 100. Always use parentheses anytime you plug stuff in. It honestly will make your life easier. All right. Now, out of these, which one would be considered the largest? Or when they're all negative, which one would be you owing the least amount of money? The F function, right? This one's just too big. And when we're really comparing these ones down to the 100th, this one's a little less in terms of like what you would owe, I guess. So technically, this is the largest out of the three. All right. Does that make sense? Any questions? Other questions, if any? Could be any unit 4. It could be from your quiz if you were confused about something from your quiz. Could be from the booklet if you saw something confusing.